Have you ever looked around and thought, why does everything feel so heavy these days? Not physically, though that happens too, but emotionally. It's like you've carried the weight of the world for so long, raising a family, working hard, showing up for everyone, and doing what needed to be done. And now, you finally have time. Time to breathe. Time to live. But something's still clinging to your shoulders, and you can't quite name it. Maybe you thought this chapter would be lighter, easier, happier, but instead you find yourself second-guessing how to spend your money, how to spend your days, or even how to say no to things that no longer serve you. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not stuck. Today, I want to have a real conversation with you. One that's less about adding more into your life and more about letting go of the things that have quietly been holding you back. Because after 60, your life isn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It's about choosing peace, choosing joy, choosing you. Let's start by looking at something that seems so simple on the surface, but has a grip tighter than we realize. Saving money out of fear. Now don't get me wrong, being financially responsible is a wonderful thing. You've likely spent decades putting aside money just in case, telling yourself not to splurge because the future is uncertain. And that mindset probably helped you build a strong foundation. But what happens when the future is now? When your bills are paid, your home is secure, and your needs are covered, yet you still hesitate to enjoy what you've worked so hard for? I once met a man named Robert. He had over $3 million tucked safely in retirement accounts. No debt, no mortgage, a life well planned. But every time his wife Linda suggested taking a trip, buying a camper, or even going out for a nice dinner, he'd freeze up. What if something happens? He'd say. What if we need that money later? And one day I gently asked him, what if you don't? What if later never comes the way you expect it to? That question landed like a stone in a still lake. You could see it ripple through him. Saving out of fear is like planting a garden and never picking the fruit. If you've prepared well and your needs are taken care of, it's time to stop living like you're still in survival mode. Spend on memories. Spend on what makes your heart feel alive. Not recklessly, not carelessly, but without guilt. You've earned this chapter. You've built it. Now live it. But let's take that idea a step further, because once you do give yourself permission to spend, the next question is, spend on what? And here's where it gets even more powerful. Stop spending money on things that don't bring you joy. It sounds obvious, doesn't it? But take a minute and really think about it. How often have you bought something out of habit, guilt, or a sense of obligation? Clothes you never wear? Gifts you feel forced to give? Gadgets you barely use? There's a woman I knew named Margaret, in her early 70s, who used to spend thousands each year on shopping. Things she told herself she needed, or were on sale, or would somehow make her feel more put together. But when I asked her what her favorite purchase was in the last 5 years, she smiled. A $500 plane ticket, she said, to surprise my sister on her birthday. We laughed, cried, stayed up late talking. I'd give anything to relive that weekend. That's the difference between spending and spending well. You see, after 60, every dollar should go toward what truly matters to you. Maybe it's helping your grandchildren with school. Maybe it's upgrading your favorite armchair so your back finally feels supported. Maybe it's taking a pottery class or planning that trip you've talked about for years. Let go of spending that feels rushed, meaningless, or done just to impress someone else. You don't owe anyone an explanation for what brings you joy. And truthfully, some of the most joyful moments in life cost nothing. A walk through the woods, a deep conversation, watching the sunset from your porch. If what you buy doesn't make you feel more connected, more alive, or more at peace, ask yourself, why am I buying it at all? Now here's where we take a deep breath and talk about something many of us have struggled with for decades. Trading your time for money. For most of your life, that's how it worked. You showed up to work, put in the hours, earned your paycheck, and built a life. And for a long time, that exchange made sense. But what happens when time becomes your most valuable currency, not money? You can always earn more money, but you can't earn more time. Once today is gone, it's gone. That doesn't mean you should stop working the moment you turn 60. Not at all. If your work still gives you meaning, lights you up, and connects you with people, keep doing it. But do it because you want to, not because you're afraid to stop. I'll never forget James, a retired high school teacher I met a few years ago. He taught for over 3 decades. People kept asking him when he'd retire, and he always answered the same way: when I stopped loving it. And at 67, he woke up one morning and knew it was time. No sadness, no regret, just peace. That's what happens when you live in alignment with your values. But I've also seen the other side. People who stay in jobs long past their joy, not because they need the money, but because they're afraid of the quiet. Afraid of what life looks like when the role they've played for years disappears. If that's you, I want to say this gently: you are more than your job title. More than your productivity. More than your to-do list. Your time is now. You've spent enough of it proving, performing, pleasing. What if the next part of your life was about presence? What if you traded time for meaning, not just money? And that's where we'll continue, because once you've made room for meaning, the question becomes, what experiences have you been putting off, and what would it feel like to stop waiting? You see, the strange thing about waiting is that it always feels temporary, until one day you realize it's become a way of life. Maybe you've said things like, "I'll take that trip someday," or "I'll try that class when things settle down." But here's the truth no one likes to admit. Someday isn't a real day on the calendar. And far too many people reach their final chapters still holding on to the plans they never gave themselves permission to begin. I remember talking to a couple named Tom and Susan. They'd spent years dreaming of hitting the road in an old Airstream trailer, driving coast to coast, exploring little towns and wide-open spaces. They had the savings. They had the time. But every year, something came up. A home repair, a family event, or just the comfort of routine. Next summer, they'd say. Until one winter, Tom had a minor health scare. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was enough to shake them awake. That spring, they packed up the Airstream and hit the road. And when they came back 6 months later, Susan said something I'll never forget. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And we didn't wait too long. So let me ask you something. What have you been putting off? That friend you've been meaning to call? That class you keep telling yourself you'll try? That dream that's been tucked away for the right time? The truth is, waiting often isn't about time or money. It's about fear. Fear of change. Fear of failure. Fear that doing something for yourself is somehow selfish. But I want to challenge that today. What if you didn't wait for the permission that may never come? What if you gave it to yourself right now? You're not too old. You're not too late. And yes, you are allowed to live a little wildly. You are allowed to feel wonder again. Life doesn't stop being magical just because you've hit a certain number of birthdays. If anything, now is when you can fully appreciate it. Now is when you've earned the right to say yes. And none of this matters. None of it truly matters if we're not taking care of the one thing that makes all of it possible, your health. That's the next thing to let go of, neglecting your health. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about trying to look 30 again. I'm talking about having the strength to carry your groceries, the energy to walk with your grandkids, the balance to avoid a fall, and the confidence to say, "Yes, I can." A lot of people think about retirement in terms of how many years they may have left. But the better question is, how many healthy years do you have left? Because you could have all the time and money in the world, but if you don't feel well, if your body aches, if you're tired all the time, if you can't move the way you want to, then the life you imagined starts to shrink. The walls close in, little by little. But here's the good news. Improving your health doesn't require you to become a bodybuilder or overhaul your entire life. It starts with one small decision at a time. Maybe that's walking a few extra minutes today. Maybe it's choosing water instead of soda. Maybe it's going to bed a bit earlier or stretching before you sit down to read. I've seen the power of tiny changes. I've seen people who could barely walk around the block slowly build up to morning walks with friends. I've seen people who thought it was too late to get strong, discover yoga or light strength training and feel years younger, just by showing up for themselves consistently. This is not about a number on the scale. This is about freedom. Your health is your access card to the life you want. Treat your body not like a problem to fix, but like a partner to care for. Feed it well. Move it often. Listen to it. Trust it. And when in doubt, start small, but start today. Now I want to talk about something that has held so many people back, not just physically, but emotionally. And that's worrying about what other people think. Oh, how deeply we carry the opinions of others, sometimes for years, sometimes our whole lives. We try to be the perfect parent, the helpful neighbor, the one who never makes waves. And over time, without even noticing, we lose pieces of ourselves in the name of being acceptable. I once worked with a woman named Diane. She was in her mid-60s and had always dreamed of learning how to paint. But she hesitated. "What if I'm no good?" she asked. "What if people think I'm silly, taking an art class at my age?" I looked at her and said, "So what if they do?" And that simple shift opened something in her. Diane signed up for that class. She didn't become a world-famous artist, but something far more important happened. She started showing up for herself. For the first time in decades, she did something just because it made her happy. And that joy changed her posture, her energy, her outlook on life. Here's what I want you to hear. The older you get, the more freedom you earn to stop caring about the noise. You don't need to explain your choices to anyone. Want to wear bold colors? Wear them. Want to stay home instead of attending that exhausting family gathering? Stay home. Want to dance alone in your kitchen just because you feel like it? Turn up the music. This isn't about being selfish. It's about being whole. Because the biggest regret people have near the end of their lives isn't, "I wish I made more people happy." It's, "I wish I'd had the courage to live life on my own terms." Let that sink in. You've spent so much of your life being everything to everyone. But what would it look like to be everything to yourself for once? To listen to your own voice before asking what others might think? To follow your curiosity without fear of judgment? That's not rebellious. That's wise. And it's also a kind of quiet revolution, one that leads to peace. Because when you stop living to impress others, you start living in alignment with your heart. And that, more than anything else, is what creates a meaningful life. And when you start living in alignment with your heart, something else begins to shift. You become more protective of your peace. And that brings us to the next thing to give up: constantly watching doom and gloom. Let's be honest. The news can be addictive. One channel says the economy is crashing, another says the world is falling apart, and suddenly your shoulders are tense, your chest feels tight, and the joy you woke up with is long gone. We tell ourselves we're staying informed, and to some extent, we are. But there's a line. There's a point where staying informed turns into staying anxious. And it's easy to cross that line without realizing it. You ever notice how no one finishes 3 hours of cable news and says, "Wow, I feel so uplifted"? Of course not. That's because most of what we watch isn't designed to inform. It's designed to keep us hooked. And fear is a powerful hook. It's a tool used to keep our attention, and our attention is valuable. Now, I'm not saying we should bury our heads in the sand. Far from it. But you do get to choose where your attention goes. You get to decide whether you want to spend your limited energy focusing on everything that's wrong, Or if you want to look for what's still beautiful, still kind, still possible. I've met people who said stepping away from the news even for a few days made them feel 10 years younger. They slept better, laughed more. They felt present again, in their own lives, not just in the chaos of the world. So maybe today is a good time to ask, is what I'm watching helping me live well? Is it making me more compassionate, more active, more peaceful? Or is it just making me scared? You deserve to be informed, yes, but you also deserve peace. You deserve joy. You deserve to spend your attention on the things you can actually control, how you move through your day, how you show up for others, and how you take care of yourself. That leads us straight into something just as important, your financial peace. Now I know this one can be tricky, because we've spent most of our adult lives thinking about money, planning for retirement, paying bills, saving for emergencies, and that kind of thinking doesn't just stop when we turn 60. But here's the thing, there's a difference between being financially aware and being financially obsessed. Some people avoid their finances altogether because it feels overwhelming. I'll deal with it later, they say. Or, I don't even want to look. But avoiding it doesn't make it go away. It just lets the anxiety grow in the dark. On the other hand, some people do nothing but look. They analyze every transaction, worry about every market dip, and delay joy because of a spreadsheet. I once spoke to a man who asked me, "If I take a vacation this year, will it mess up my tax bracket?" And my heart broke a little. Not because he was wrong to ask, it's smart to think about finances, but because he was so afraid to live the life he'd already saved for. Here's what I told him, and what I'll tell you now. Your money was never meant to control you. It was meant to support you. You worked hard. You planned wisely. Now let your money do its job, help you live well. Talk to your advisor, understand your plan, then take a deep breath and let go of the fear. A strong retirement plan isn't just about a big number in your bank account. It's about how free you feel to enjoy the years ahead. So whether you're the person who avoids the numbers or the one who checks them every morning, find your middle ground. Give up the stress. Keep the structure. And use your money the way it was always meant to be used, as a tool for a rich, joyful, meaningful life. And all of this, your peace, your choices, your time, it brings us to the most important thing of all, the illusion that you have forever. Now I say that not to scare you. I say it because I've sat across from people who had everything, health, time, love, and then it was gone in a moment. And when that happens, everything becomes clear. The dishes in the sink don't matter. The judgment of others fades away. What matters are the moments you said, "I love you." The chances you took, the experiences you allowed yourself to have, the people you forgave, the dreams you no longer postponed. I often ask this question. If you knew with absolute certainty that this was your last year, what would you do differently? Who would you call? What would you finally say? What would you stop tolerating? And what would you finally begin? And the truth is, most people know their answers, but they go right back to their routines. They wait for that perfect day, that clean slate, that permission slip. But here's the secret. You don't need the world's permission to start living like your life matters. You just need your own. No, you don't have to do everything in one day. You don't need to travel the world or cross off every goal. Sometimes living with intention means planting a flower in your garden. It means calling someone just to say you're thinking of them. It means writing down your story, not because it's extraordinary, but because it's yours. Life isn't about waiting for the end to wake up. It's about waking up now. This moment, right here, right now, is your chance. To forgive, to release, to breathe, to be present, to choose joy, to let go of the heavy and to make room for the light. Because you are still here. You are still breathing. And that means there is still time for beauty, for laughter, for love. There is still time for you. And if you take nothing else from our time together today, take this. Letting go is not the same as giving up. It's choosing what stays. It's choosing peace. It's choosing what truly matters. So, what are you ready to let go of today? I imagine you might be feeling a lot right now. Maybe some of what we've talked about hit closer to home than you expected. Maybe you're already thinking of one or two things you're ready to release, or maybe you're still sitting with it all, wondering what your first step should be. That's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out today. Letting go isn't about rushing into action. It's about becoming honest with yourself. It's about choosing what truly deserves space in the time you have left and what doesn't. There's a quiet kind of power in that. The kind of power that comes with age. The kind that says, I've carried enough. It's time to lay a few things down. Because when you stop saving out of fear, you make space for freedom. When you stop spending on things that don't bring you joy, you begin to feel lighter. When you stop trading your time for money and instead trade it for meaning, your days start to feel more alive. When you finally take that trip, write that letter, or say yes to the experience you've been putting off, you begin to wake up. Not just to the world, but to yourself. When you stop ignoring your body and start treating it with respect, you gain energy, not just to move, but to dream again. When you stop worrying about what others think, you start remembering who you really are. And when you turn down the noise, the fear, the news, the pressure, and turn up the volume on peace, you begin to hear your own voice again. The one that's been there all along, gently asking, what if life could feel lighter? And it can. It really can. When you stop ignoring your financial plan, but also stop obsessing over it, you find balance. And when you finally, deeply let go of the illusion that there will always be more time, you stop waiting. You start living. And that's what this entire message is about. Not having less or doing less, but living more, with intention, with heart, with presence. I know it can feel vulnerable to let go. Sometimes we hold on to old habits and beliefs not because they serve us, but because they're familiar. And that familiarity can feel like safety. But I promise you this, what's on the other side of letting go is not emptiness. It's room. Room for laughter, for stillness, for connection, for creativity, for surprise, for awe. Room for you. So if something inside you is stirring right now, if there's a part of you quietly whispering, it's time, listen to it. Trust it. You don't have to change your whole life overnight. Just begin with one small decision. Say no to something that drains you. Say yes to something that delights you. Go for a walk. Make that phone call. Donate the clutter. Light a candle and just sit in the quiet. Because this isn't about fixing yourself. You're not broken. This is about returning to yourself. Coming home to who you are underneath the weight of all you've carried. And if you're thinking, is it really okay for me to live like this? Let me be the one to say, yes. Yes, it is. Yes, you are allowed. Yes, it is possible. You are not too old. It is not too late. You don't need anyone else's approval to live your life fully and freely. You've already earned it. Through years of showing up, of giving, of trying, of surviving. Now is the time to receive. Now is the time to breathe. So before we go, I want to ask you something from the heart. What are you ready to let go of, starting today? You don't have to shout it. You don't have to make it public. But if you feel comfortable, I invite you to share it in the comments. You never know who might read your words and feel just a little braver because of you. And if this message spoke to you, if it helped you feel seen, understood, or inspired, I would be honored if you gave this video a like. Subscribe if you want more conversations like this, gentle reminders that aging doesn't mean fading, it means rising. It means showing up more fully than ever before. It means choosing what matters. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for your time, for your presence, and for the courage it takes to look inward and say, I'm ready to live lighter. Here's to living not by habit, but by choice. Not by fear, but by love. Not by the weight of the past, but the openness of now. You are here. You are breathing. And that, my friend, is more than enough to begin. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, be kind to yourself and keep making space for the life that's waiting for you.